we've got great excitement with this broadcast, because this broadcast is apparently officially going to be going on to the AHDB podcast as well as ours. So we've got to be very descriptive, Maz, on this for people on the podcast. Hi everyone. We're going to do the official launch show properly. We're just waiting for the social media to kick in. I can see with my bank of lights that Facebook, Maz, is always very slow to kick in. But Maz, we got your gift. There you go, Maz.
It was awesome.
So, Isaac, can you just describe for everyone on the podcast what I'm presenting to Maz, who's in Australia, who we'll find out more about, and where she is. Isaac, what am I presenting, Maz?
So that'll be daffodils. It's springtime here in the UK, so they are everywhere. So I went for a quick cycle over lunchtime today, and yeah, gorgeous.
Excellent. So Isaac, what gift have you got for our guest, please? If I'm bringing daffodils to the party, what have you brought, Maz? I love this, Maz.
Did you know that the Big Pen is one of the most original? You got me there, Max.
I love the fact that the Big Pen was so good when it was first designed. It's not changed in decades.
Facebook still wasn't live. Isaac, you broke the internet the other day by recording on a bike. Could you just describe that for everyone on the podcast? And I'm sure Maz saw it as well. Isaac, just tell us about that clip on the bike, please, because it was very entertaining.
So I've in my madness decided to sign up for the London to Brighton off-road one. So London to Brighton cycling, or the event is quite big, but then I've decided to try and do an off-road. So in September. So and signed up for that, and I've set myself the target to be in the top 25% of the time. So I thought,
wow,
just to give a bit of extra pressure, I'll do that. So yeah.
So we had a video, everyone, of Isaac on his bike falling off, promoting this Talking Leaders, and guys, the lights have all gone green. We're officially live now on social media. So Maz, are you ready? Isaac, are you ready?
Ready.
Okay, so. Hello, my name is Max McGillivray from Beanstalk Global. Isaac, take us away, introduce the Talking Leaders broadcast today, and more importantly, introduce our stupendous guest. Isaac, go.
Excellent. Thanks, Max. Yes, I'm Isaac van Heerden, working for the AHDB. I work in the AgriLeader team. And basically, what the AgriLeader team try and do is, we know that leadership and management skills are quite often low on the priority for farmers. There's a lot of other pressures, and it's also quite hard to access sometimes. So that leads to making it harder for them to recruit staff, to retain staff, and run their businesses effectively. So what we try and do in AgriLeader is really help strengthening those skills that'll ease some staffing pressures, free up some time for strategy, and boost performance. So, with all the growing challenges that there is in the sector, investing in your people and in yourself is really important. And we try and make it as easy as possible. AHDB from a wider angle, and we do market intelligence, market developments and exports, and all of those kind of things. So the levy body here in the UK. For our esteemed guests, and Maz, or Catherine Marriott, I met Maz in Brazil, and on some mad and coincidence, I ended up at the CSC, the Contemporary Scholars Conference for Nuffield in Brazil, and we had a blast of a time. So, yeah, Maz, and over to you. Tell us a bit about yourself.
It's so lovely to be here with you both and everybody who's tuning in. So from Australia, and grew up on a sheep farm in southern Australia, so in Victoria. Have spent the last 25 years in the agriculture sector, working across a number of industries, largely the beef industry, but also grains and a lot of international agricultural research. Spent 5 years up in Asia working as a beef feedlot nutritionist and general management consultant, which was wonderful. Have run leadership programs and ran my own leadership company specializing in women for a little while. So yeah, love agriculture, love the industry, really passionate about people, finding gaps, leveraging value, and having some fun along the way, because life can be too serious sometimes.
Well done. Now, guys, I'm just going to jump across you because Maz, you've been very, very modest, and just for the sake of the folk on the podcast, I just want to highlight some of Maz's background. So I'm just looking at my notes. Maz, I would read this off my teleprinter or whatever the expression is, but my Labrador stood on it, so you have to excuse if I'm looking away because I've got it all printed out on the hanging up here. Catherine Marriott OAM. Order of Australia. I just think that's such a brilliant title. She is a trailblazer in agriculture, leadership, and sustainability, with over 20 years of experience across executive roles, as Maz stated, governance and consultancy. Catherine has a unique ability to bridge the worlds of practical farming, science, and global ESG, environmental, social, and governance. And where the bit that I was really interested in that you're currently completing your Nuffield Scholarship. Nuffield, thumbs up, Maz?
If I had 6 thumbs, they'd all be up.
Excellent. And she's doing that with a focus on the impact and influence of global ESG policy on Australian farmers. Understanding the changing ESG and sustainable landscape globally is paramount to ensuring farmers are prepared for changing market options and both public and private sector expectations. She uses her rural science degree to understand the technical aspects of agriculture, while her experience in business leadership, development and governance helps maximize efficiency and outcomes for the organizations for whom she works. Catherine has worked as a beef industry consultant, an entrepreneur, a farmer member-based organizational CEO, and has sat on several NFP and public sector boards, both in Australia and internationally. She received the 2022 Queen's Birthday Honours Order of Australia Medal for contribution to agriculture and rural communities, is UNE's 2019 Distinguished Alumni Award recipient, a graduate of the Australian Ruralship Leadership Programme, a graduate of the Australian Institute of Company Directors, and was the 2012 WA Rural Woman of the Year. Maz, I'm so proud for all of us to have you on. We've done 40 of these, and we've had everyone who's walked up the top of Everest. We've had Olympic skiers, but to actually have someone from Australia who's got the credentials that you have in agriculture that we can learn from, I just think it's so great that Isaac has got you on. With agriculture, you could have gone into any direction, Maz. Why did you you could have gone into politics, as we were talking about in the green room. You could have gone into sports. Why agriculture? Why did you center on ag, please?
I think agriculture is such a rewarding career. You know, there is so many opportunities, but at the base of agriculture, you're fundamentally making a difference to humanity. And I think that's what I really love about it, is that, you know, food is a human need. Caring for the environment is essential for our humanity. Rural communities, let's face it, are just really fun to be in. Yeah, and agriculture sits right across all of those things. So for me, I grew up on a farm. That is a privilege. And I think that's what opened my eyes to the possibility of agriculture. And from there, just really got determined about where the gaps were and where I can make a difference. Humans are at the center of everything. I think so often humans are forgotten about, and yet humans are fundamental to making decisions, handling conflict, building innovation, getting things done. And happy workplaces and humans are actually at the forefront and at the center of whether things work or not. So that's where my sort of leaning towards trying to understand people and bring people along with me and share the joy of being in ag has really come from. And I've been really blessed that I've been able to carve out a career in something that I'm really passionate about.
Fantastic. And are you good at relationships? Are you a good networker? Are you a good relationship builder?
Well, shall I answer that, Maz? Short answer, yes, but come on, Maz, give us a longer answer.
I think relationships are fundamental to everything, and you know, like I'm not an extrovert and I'm not an introvert. I sort of sit in the middle, but I understand how important relationships are. And so when I'm building relationships, I try and come at it with a gift for people. So instead of when I'm building relationships with people, you know, so often we come at it from a perspective of what can I get out of it? And I have always just, I guess, innately been generous in nature and said, hey, you know, this is a thing that I think might help you. Hey, there's 3 other people over here doing these things. So I'm not very good at much, but I'm quite good at networking and connecting good humans that end up going and doing wonderful things.
Fantastic. If you could just bear with me, I was listening to a big bit about AI earlier today with an AI expert, and it's not surprising what this guy was saying, that within a 3 to 5 year period, we will be sat at our office desk, and instead of going onto Chat GBT, we'll have a hologram at the side of our desk, and you'll say to it, "I'm thinking about going away this weekend. I think I'm going to go to northern New South Wales. Where should I go? Book my flights." And you will have this interaction. And that, in some ways, that's frightening, but also it allows your key skills of, say, strategic planning to come to the fore. You don't have to worry about the admin side. But as this chap said, the one thing that AI is never going to conquer is relationships. And that's one thing that I've learned, especially with the likes of Isaac and his colleague Mark. Agriculture, farming in the UK, overseas, Maz, it's all about relationships, and so we're all going to be. If anything, we're going to come to the fore even more with the advance of AI, because it's all about relationships. Maz, would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. Look, I listened to a really interesting podcast the other day by a guy called Mo. Insert last name. Totally apologise to Mo. Forgot his last name. But he spoke about the fact that AI, and this is curious how this is going to play out, actually, because he said that AI is now learning emotional intelligence. And it's really funny because one of the things that he said, like, I use ChatGPT quite a lot to, go over documents and give me ideas on things. And I used to get in and just be like, give me this, and be just really blunt, because I'm like, it's a machine. I don't have time for politeness. And he says that we've all got a responsibility to shape AI because it's actually learning from us. Yeah. And so then I started to get into ChatGPT and be like, hello, ChatGPT. I was wondering if you could please help me with this. Thank you so much. And started being polite with it. And it's now like become my friend. So it's like, hello, Catherine, welcome back. I'm so delighted. And the language that it's giving me back has changed. And so I don't know what to do with all of that, but it's just weird. It's super helpful, but I think we've got to maintain our focus on human connection and human relationships, because that is fundamentally what it means to be human. We can use tools, we can do all the things, but having fundamental like human connection and human relationships, I would hate to see be replaced by robots and whatever.
I don't think it will happen totally. I went to a TEDx talk, and they were talking about an artificial kind intelligence, especially so for in old age or and people like that. And yes, and having AI there that can help and are just friendly will make a huge difference. Just on a sidelines, and there is a conference being organised in September by a Nuffield Scholars on AI. It's actually the Science Museum in London, but so we'll get back to, and it's just been released this last week or so. So we'll also give it a bit more of a plug at some point. But yes, and keep an eye out for that. Maz, so you talked earlier about a leadership and your own leadership company, and especially focused on women. So what was that all about? So tell us a bit more about that.
So I did that kind of by accident, Isaac, to be honest. And we had, I was working in the northern beef industry, and we relied heavily on the live export industry. And that industry was shut down by government decision overnight. And so what happened in that space is I took a step back, and everybody was sort of angry and shouty and defensive and all of the things because their industry had just been destroyed. And I totally understand where they're coming from. But I took a step back and I was like, how did this happen? Why did it happen? And what role can I play in helping to get the northern beef industry back up and running? And I realised that there was no women as part of the conversation. And so I asked a few girls around, and I was like, well, why aren't you stepping forward? You're smart, you're intelligent, you're articulate. And they were like, I don't know how. And so I thought, holy moly, we've got 50% of an amazing resource in our industry. And just through a lack of confidence, there's no one actually stepping forward. And the people that were attacking us were women in the cities, and people trust people that are like them, but they couldn't find any people that looked like them from the bush because it was all sort of older males. And they were doing their best, and I'm not criticising them at all, but what I am saying is there was a gap there. And so what I did is I applied for some funding to run a 3-day one-off women's leadership program where I got facilitators to come in and build confidence through a Myers-Briggs style tool so that people got to know themselves better, and then brought in some communication coaches to help Charlie Arnott from the US, from the Center for Food Integrity. If anybody's interested, that guy is an absolute genius. And he came over, bless him, for a whole day, flew the whole way to Broome from Kansas City for one night to do this for me. Is just an absolute 10. Anyway, and then from that, I had 50 women turn up from right across Australia and 4 blokes. Bless the blokes for coming. And then from that, people said, "Oh, Maz, this is a need. Like, you need to do more of this." So then I ran another one about 2,000 kilometres south in Geraldton. And again, I had 30 women in the room there, and they were like, "Maz, you've got to do more of this." So I started a women's leadership company totally by accident. But then at the end of 4 years, I was pretty puffed, but I had 2,500 women come through that. And it was extraordinary because you see lights come on for women. And as a result, you've seen women step into community roles, into council leadership roles. And I'm not saying that I did that. All I did was provide a platform for them to learn and explore. They've done the work themselves, but it was just the most extraordinary privilege to be able to sort of start that. And then I was lucky enough to do the Australian Rural Leadership Program, which is an 18-month program in Australia. And so I do a lot of facilitation for that foundation as well, which I just adore. I just adore, seeing people's lights come on in people's heads, and, then they become a better leader, which makes people happier. And ultimately, I think me being a leadership sort of facilitator is a bit selfish because it makes people happier, and I like happy people, and happy people in rural Australia is just great for everybody. So it's kind of selfish.
Isaac, can I ask, Maz, everyone's like a book. Everyone's got a book in them, and it feels like you're halfway through your book. What's next? If we're going to buy, what's next? Are you looking to stay in Australia? Are you looking to work overseas? What's next?
Oh, look, honestly, I would adore to do more work overseas. I'm a big systems thinker, and, there's some really big global challenges at the moment.
Yep.
What my Nuffield Scholarship unveiled to me, and it's kind of embarrassing actually, because having worked in Asia for 5 years, I can't believe that this hadn't come to the fore more prominently in my thinking. But, we've got some really wicked systems challenges with global greenhouse gas emissions, for example, and climate change. And we've got the wealthy countries, investing in all of this stuff and being carbon neutral and, doing all of these things. And then you've got the developing world, which is being fundamentally left behind. And I think we've got an opportunity to have conversations and be part of conversations and lead change thinking. Wow, English is totally my friend this morning. But to bring people together to try and figure out systems that we can bring more equity into the global agricultural conversation and lift all boats, if you like. So, yeah, doing some work in Northern Australia, which is really remote, and that's the photo behind me. They've had a cracking wet season up there, but would love to do some overseas work looking at how we can get better policies to improve agriculture globally, not just in wealthy countries.
And I say, Maz is obviously a leader. We're going to have 5,000, 10,000 people that watch this. You've got the weight of the AHDB behind. We need leaders like Maz. How can we collectively help Maz, do you think, Isaac, on our, because we always talk about collaboration, and we've got this global family of everyone that loves agriculture. Isaac, how do you think we can take Catherine to become even a better leader and create even more influence?
I think that is the beauty of social media. I mean, it's got a lot of downs, but having things like Maz on Talking Leaders and on all of the different platforms, that could really change things. And Maz, like you said, some people need some people that look like them. So with the whole all parts of diversity, we need to promote it wherever and however we can. So I think that's the way of getting people, inspirational people like Maz, out into the world and on various different platforms. So and getting some voices heard and inspiring people. So yeah, Maz, for me, you've talked there about going around the world. We met in Brazil through Nuffield. Where else have your travels taken you, and what have your biggest takeaways from those travels?
Oh, holy moly. So, gosh, it was such a privilege, Isaac, and meeting you was just an absolute hoot and highlight in all of that. So, went to Brazil, obviously, and Brazil was just such an extraordinary lesson because for us in Australia, and I'm not sure what it was like in the EU and the UK, but you have an opinion of Brazil, which is they are destroying the Amazon. And going there and listening to the people and seeing the farms, it's quite the opposite. They are doing the most extraordinary job preserving forest, replanting forest. And I'm not saying it's all been perfect in the past, but certainly now, when people say to me, you know, where would you go to learn about agriculture, innovation, conservation, and all of the things? And I'm like, mate, get to Brazil. It's extraordinary. From Brazil, I went up. Yeah, wasn't it amazing?
Yeah.
From Brazil, went up into America, Canada, then South Korea and Japan as big trading partners for Australia, and then spent some time in Africa. Obviously, my penchant for systems thinking and global food security led me to Africa to try and understand how ESG plays out in that space. And what I learned was that ESG is 100% a first world conversation, in that we can afford to be caring about our environment. And you know, if you like, having traveled through Asia for years and then also Africa now as part of my Nuffield, it's become really clear to me that where you sit on a moral hierarchy of needs will lead to what your priority is in the ESG landscape. And in the developed world, we focus on E unequivocally, which is how do you care for and the impact you have on the environment. And that is because largely we've got our social, which is how do you care for people, and governance, how do you run your businesses, sorted, because it's a legal prerogative. In Asia, they're largely focused on S. They've got reasonable governance there. And so their focus is on how do we get enough food to people? How do we educate people? How do we provide healthcare to people? So they don't, it's not that they don't care about the environment, it's that they can't yet afford to have that as a priority. And then you go to Africa, and there are countries in Africa where governance is just shot. And you can't even start to think about socially caring for your people through a public system without having your governance sorted. So where you are globally will depend on what your priority is. And that was really important for me to understand, because Australia is a really large exporting nation. So we export 70% of what we produce. And so it was really important for me to go out and understand what their priorities are, so that I can come back and share that information with Australian farmers with an eye to either have them practice change on farm if our markets were looking for, you know, carbon neutrality or purple hats on yellow cows or whatever they were looking for. So I could bring them back in and inform them. So farmers could make a decision on, do I need to create practice change on my farm, or do I need to find alternate markets because the ones that we've got are no longer going to take my product? And also inform the research sector. So in Australia, we've got organisations similar to AHDB, but I love AHDB's model because it's cross-sectoral. So we've got what they call research and development corporations that are funded by levies and matched with public, like with government funds to do projects. But I wanted to be able to inform them, hey, glyphosate is likely to be banned, paraquat is likely to be banned. They're going to put a methane emissions tax on us, so we need to be investing in research that reduces methane emissions in livestock. So those sorts of things. So it was an amazing experience. Most of my preconceived ideas were shot, which I love because it challenged my thinking and my judgment and gave me some really grassroots information and sort of knowledge to be able to shape my thinking around. And the other, just while I'm on a bit of a rant here, one of the major things that I think came out of it is the importance of bringing farmers to the decision-making table really early on, because things like carbon neutrality, it's a cute initiative and it's, you know, we need to be moving the needle on that stuff. But what some of the suggestions are coming out are totally impractical for farmers. And if you'd brought farmers in, they could have actually given you more practical, time-bound solutions to say, hey, this is what we could do. So anyway, that's a bit of what I learned.
Mas, can I ask the hairy question? America, politics, the only thing you can predict at the moment is change coming out of America. And we've seen the likes of BlackRock Capital, Disney, Apple looking to drop their ESG scenarios, put policies, because they don't see that it's adding value to their shareholders. So was it just a pipe dream? Should we just get on with our life and move on?
I love this question so much, Max, because it's full of complexity and just radicalness. So, you know, what happened in America is not altogether surprising. I mean, when I was over there, it was fairly clear that Trump was going to get in and that he wasn't going to be prioritizing ESG because, you know, whether we like it or not, and whether America likes it or not, 11.3% of their population live below the poverty line.
Yeah.
And so people are hurting. And when people are hurting, they can't afford to care about things like, you know, carbon emissions and that sort of thing, because they're just trying to feed their families 3 square meals a day, right? So I met with a professor in South Korea, and he said it so eloquently. He said ESG has 2 faces. It has the face where investors want to be seen to do the right thing, and then it's got investors that want to make money. And in the short term, you can't do both at the same time. Now, I believe you can in the longer term, but it requires pausing, it requires systems design, it requires getting everybody along supply chains to have input into the solutions to make sure that they're practical. But I think it's, you know, the whole ESG conversation is shrouded in short-term thinking, either through an election cycle or through the shareholder reporting period. And that's actually not going to help us move the needle on anything, because what we're seeing is companies coming out and saying we're going to join the Net Zero Banking Alliance, of which in America there are no major banks involved in it now, because what's happened is they're like, oh, it's really hard to measure. It's actually really hard to achieve. So instead of going, hang on, let's rethink how we might move the needle on these existential threats, we've just given up and gone, it's too hard, we're walking away because it's costing us money. And so that's what I was talking about with global thinking and bringing people together to create solutions, is we've got all this short-term thinking, ego-driven, power-hungry, money-driven sort of things trying. So
bankers.
And we're trying to, yeah, they're in there, right? Like, and you've got this short-term technical thinking trying to solve a longer-term adaptive, wicked challenge, and it just doesn't work. So we're seeing this big statement, fail, stop, give up. Rather, what I would love to see is, wow, big problem, climate change. We've been talking about climate change for 30 years. We'll be talking about it for 100. It's not something that's going away. So how do we bring people together, create some systems thinking, understand the systems we're working in? Because agriculture gets things done to it a lot. Like, you know, at the moment, it's carbon emissions. Then it's, you know, natural capital is starting to come in. And while ever we're focusing on one aspect of an interconnected, complex system, we're only ever going to fall short of moving the needle forward and building prosperity over the longer term. So, yeah, so it's really interesting. America, the commercial sector is just as important as the political sector, but at the moment, people are hurting. So we've got to slow up, rethink the whole thing, and try and figure out how we're going to make change, because it's an existential thing, right? We need to change our systems because we're getting more floods, more droughts. And I am so sick of people saying, oh my gosh, another flood. I'm like, you know, it's not surprising anymore, particularly.
Yeah, Matt, can I just say that's probably the best explanation I've heard in the last year on the politics around ESG. So I get the feeling that if the farming community globally can just keep going, and the investors, they'll bounce back up when they see that actually there is a long-term reward to be had.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Go on, Isaac.
So, you know, on a global scale, that's really important. But like you said, for a farmer in Africa or in Asia or in the UK or Australia, so the whole thing about ESG as kind of an abstract thing. Why is it important for everyday farmers to actually think about this?
I think it is. So it's a really interesting question, Isaac, because in Australia anyway, farmers have been told, you know, ESG is coming at you, you need to do things. But no one's actually giving them clarity on what they have to do. And there's certainly no tools really available en masse and publicly available for farmers to be able to engage in this. And then the rules change. And so I think it's important for farmers to engage in this, and this is my little Maz term. I've come up with a new meaning for ESG. And so instead of environmental, social, and governance, it stands for enabling smart growth. Yeah. So it's actually looking at your business and figuring out what's important to your business, what's important to your family, what's important to your community, what works for your soil type, what works to maintain profitability in your system. Focus on that. Now, there are legislative requirements which farmers are going to need to be aware of in Australia. I'm having a menopausal moment and I've forgotten the name of the legislation, just bear with me, but there's something that means you've got to now put your carbon number in if you're a company over a certain time, age. And so there's legislative requirements, but your banks should largely help you with that. And then you've also got to look at, well, what does my market demand? Now, in Australia, largely, markets aren't demanding anything because our major markets are South Korea and Japan, of which 66% of their calories are imported every day. So Japan and South Korea are two of the cleanest, greenest countries on the planet, but they can't afford to be fussy with things like carbon neutrality because they import so much of the calories they require. They can't afford yet to say, no, we're not buying from you because you're not X or Y. America is another large client of Australia. They've never been interested in the net zero piece, for example. And so it's about trying to, like, from a farmer's perspective, it's first and foremost, like, cut out the noise. There is so much noise, and there are so many consultants now that have made a job out of keeping ESG really complex, which does my head in. Yeah. But just figure out what's right for your business. What are the data points that mean something to the profitability and sustainability of your business first? Just think about that. Speak to your banks and find out what they need and how they are going to help you get it, because they're not going to pay you for it. So how are they going to help you get the data they need? And then keep an eye on your markets and emerging trends, that sort of thing. And try and keep it simple. Don't wherever there's an opportunity to complicate things, people will do it to keep themselves employed, and it irritates my pants off.
Just for everyone on the podcast, we're just going to have a slight technical moment. Maz, can you just turn the lights on back in your room, because you're going dark. We're losing you.
Hang on.
You're slipping away.
I don't know how to do that.
For everyone on the podcast, you need a bit of jeopardy. Everyone on the podcast is fine, Maz. No, if you can do it, you can do it. If not, we will carry on. It'll be.
Let me try and be fancy. Hang on.
No, but whilst you're doing that, Isaac, I love this expression that Maz has used of ESG, enabling smart growth. Can you see farmers in the UK? Can you see farmers adopting that? I just wondered if that's going to be new phraseology. I'd like a groundswell, which I'm sure you're going to be at later this year. What do you think?
I think that it's, simplifying things, not overcomplicating, like Maz said, there is so important. And there's people that's made a lot of money and is making a lot of money by overcomplicating it. You need to get people, any of these concepts in people's language, I think, and that's something we're all guilty of. So simplifying it and getting it simple to do and simple to understand, rather than overcomplicating it. So definitely agree. And it's an important message to get out there. And so it's quite often win-win. So we do a lot of environmental work in AHDB at the moment with the environmental baselining and these MAC curves. So what is good for the environment, what's good for carbon, but also good for your bottom line. And that's where it needs to be at. And these win-win things, if it's something that's being pushed down and complicated and hard to do, it's not a win for anybody. So whilst there's so many things that are actually win-wins, we just need to make it simpler and explain it in that way rather than a stick.
Yeah, well, yeah, well done. And just Maz, let's go back to the investment community. You would hope that some of the major pension funds internationally would look to go further down this ESG route to drive that. Let's go for the big term of societal change. Do you think that that's still there, or is that dipping away as we go through this cycle?
So it's really interesting, Max, because I work, one of my clients is a big Canadian pension fund at the moment. and they are so delightful to work for because they're passionate about the environment, right? But they understand the practical realities that we're working in. And so they've said things to me like, Maz, we want you to baseline the herd and the business. We want you to benchmark and baseline where the natural capital is. We want you to baseline and protect Aboriginal sites because it's important. Wow. And we want to make sure that it's well thought and that it's not going to slow down business or make less money, or it can make less money, but not make the business unprofitable. And I love that because they're patient investors. And so with patience, you can move the needle, you can improve the environment, you can improve animal welfare, you can improve people's workplaces, and you can do it with longevity. So, I think that is one side of the investment community, which is a patient investor. Then I spoke to a large multinational agribusiness in Washington, D.C. So I spoke with the head of global, and I won't name the company, but I started off being I still am really impressed with this company, right? But they started off by saying, we've got goals of reducing our scope 1 and 2 emissions, which is, your carbon emissions that you can control, by 75%. And then our scope 3 emissions, which is the farmer inputs, by only 40%. So we're looking after our farmers. We understand it's hard, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. What are you doing to support the farmers? And they said, oh, we're actually investing millions in research with innovative farmers to, demonstrate practices that are going to move the needle and stuff. And I was like, oh my God, this is like a unicorn company. They're doing all the things. They're speaking with farmers. They're investing with farmers. This is amazing. And then I said, oh, so obviously you're preferentially buying from those innovative farmers who understand their carbon numbers. They've got better soil carbon. They're doing all the things. And he said, no, absolutely not, because we've got supply chains that need to be filled. We've got people in factories that need work to do. And we've got supermarket shelves that want drinks and chips and all of the things. So we can't afford to care where our raw materials come from at the moment, because we just need to keep the supply chain going. And that's when it dawned on me that all of this ESG stuff is important, but it hasn't been well thought enough. And the systems are not yet in place to make sure that it works over the longer term. So there's no incentive really for everyday farmers to do anything really through that supply chain, because they're not going to be paid for it. Now, unless you look at your own business and you go, hang on, enabling smart growth. So can I use some of those sustainable innovations to improve my bottom line, to reduce my fertilizer requirements? And that makes sense, but that makes sense from a business perspective, not from a supply chain and shareholder perspective. Does that make sense?
It does. And I'd even segue that into the start of our conversation where we were talking about AI. If there's going to be one benefit of AI over the next 3 to 5 years, it's going to be on the environmental aspect. I'm sure a number of farmers who are dialed in have already done this, but just ask ChatGPT, how can I make myself a better ESG performing business, and just challenge it. And it'd be fascinating to see what it comes out with, especially if you put in more details of your business. Isaac, your thoughts?
Yeah, 100%. So I went to see an amazing farmer in Argentina on the Pampas, and so he was in a joint venture with various companies, global companies that were investing there. And so my question to you, Maz, is so these companies on paper, and all of them were very pro this and pro ESG, and really trying to do the best, even in a country like Argentina, who is quite volatile financially. But how that, so depending on the company and so the level of involvement, that didn't always relate to practical stuff on the farm. Actually, while I was there, so we went to a show, and he won a award for his people, the social side of it. But actually, and he was talking, investing companies really don't get us and don't get it on the ground. How do you marry those two up? And investing companies that want to do the right thing, but actually, on the ground, even for good people, it doesn't always work.
Yeah, and I think that comes back to where we started this conversation, Isaac, which is relationships, and actually having these companies work with farmers to support them through that practice change. But what I'd really love to see is companies paying for it.
Yeah.
You know, farmers, particularly in Australia, and I know that the UK has some quite amazing subsidies that we would only dream of over here. But to actually, you know, there's a lot of companies expecting a whole heap of data for free for farmers, which takes them time, etc., and they're not being paid any more for it. So I'd love to be able to see supply chains, and I'm yet to have a conversation with McDonald's. And apparently McDonald's are actually paying farmers a premium for their for farmers that are engaging in their certification system. So I think that, you know, it's a confluence of time, and it's a confluence of practice change and practicality, and and bringing together the financial reality of all of that. And I think if we can get those three things right, you're going to see practice change, because it makes good business sense, and then because it's also the right thing to do. But I think we need more support and understanding of the weight that farmers are carrying in this whole space, so that we can celebrate and pay. I was looking for a fancier word, but pay farmers for what's the word I'm looking for?
Cash.
No, there's a word. Like, anyway, pay them for the role that they're playing in ecosystem services and promoting, you know, environmental health for all of us to breathe.
Yeah. Can I have another go at this? My terminology of societal change, because there's so Maz, I'm sure you've heard of it. We have a big regenerative event in the UK called Groundswell, which I know a number of people in the UK and internationally go to, and they had a keynote speaker from, I've forgotten his name, Professor something from Chatham House, and he did a really eloquent speech about the international food supply chain. And there was a Q&A, and a chap stood up and he said the obligatory thing: when are the supermarkets going to pay farmers more money? And the professor very eloquently said, actually, young man, it is not the supermarkets who I believe are the root cause of this. It's actually two entities. It's the global agricultural businesses. So those businesses that are presenting the feed for the beautiful livestock behind you, and also the large food multinationals. So they are controlling these markets. So they and as a whole, they're making so much money that if they could invest that, and rather, as we sort of talked about before, rather than just looking at in the short term, it's a bit like the Singaporean government plan. Have a 15-year plan and everyone strives towards it, and we'll all be in a better place. I know this is slightly pipe dream, but if we could all be very collaborative and work with those massive international grain businesses and the massive international food businesses, and have that 15-year plan all around ESG to make the planet better, Maz, we would be in a better place.
100%. And it was really interesting because when I was in the EU, I met with somebody who will remain nameless in accordance with Nuffield Chatham House rules. And, you know, she was a really high-powered person in the EU Commission. And I was talking to her, and she's talking me through the farm to fork and the Green Deal, and how, you know, the pending deforestation regulations. And I was like, yeah, this is all really, really cute and amazing, and we need to have altruistic goals for sure like that. But have you thought about, like, what you're doing is you are thinking about the 1.5 billion people that can afford to live like that and live inside the OECD. What are you doing to the 6.5 billion people to support the 6.5 billion people that live outside the OECD? Because last time I checked, we all live on the same planet. And what you're doing by reducing your livestock emissions and, you know, making it harder to produce food for farmers is you're putting that pressure on developing countries, which don't have as efficient systems, which produce more greenhouse gas emissions per kilo of beef or whatever it is that they're doing, and it lifts their prices. So how do we get a better global system? And I gave her the other example of the EU deforestation regulations and the impact on themselves, because 40% of the soy that the EU purchase comes from Brazil. So I was like, well, if you bring that regulation in, where are you going to get your soy from? Because you need your soy to feed your own livestock. And they're like, oh, yeah, again, we hadn't really considered that. And so, like, that's just a couple of examples of siloed thinking around self-interest, and we're doing what is right for us, instead of actually lifting and thinking about the globe. Because ultimately, while we're only thinking about ourselves, we're actually in the longer term making it worse for ourselves, because self-interest, although in a 2-horse race will win, does never win in the long term.
Well done. God, Isaac, I'm learning so much
I told you it was going to be a belter, Max.
Yeah. Just Maz, with Nuffield, are you likely to do a roving tour with this? Because there's so much that we can learn from you. It's great that we got you on, but it feels like we just got to hear from you more so. What's the potential of that?
I'd love to come. I'm happy to come and talk anywhere. I love yarning, because whenever I talk, I learn so much.
Isaac's your agent. he'll sort it out.
We'll tour with Maz, and it's got a ring
you
to it.
You can come, Isaac. Let's go.
We'll have a few good yarns. I guess back on the whole Nuffield thing and the places you visited. Just want to delve on there. Some of the more take homes and takeaway things that you've learned and that you think you can really take back to Australian farmers and anybody listening on this and whether that's around ESG or otherwise.
Oh gosh, Isaac, how do you answer that question? I have finished the first draft of my report, and it was the hardest thing I have ever done, because my report is on ESG, but I've spent 18 months traveling the world, and there's so many awesome, amazing, interesting things going on globally that didn't fit in my report. So I'm like this vessel full of frustration, because I've got all these things that I want to share with everybody and no mechanism to do it yet. But a couple of standout things which are not related to ESG was on my Global Focus program. So my Global Focus program is a 5-week privilege, to be honest, where you go to 5 different countries with a group of other Nuffield scholars. And that was the biggest gift, because you get your judgments challenged, you have robust conversations which change all of your perceptions, and you learn. Anyway, it was extraordinary. But a couple of things that really stood out to me that I haven't yet shared, because a lot of what I learned I've shared already, was in Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe are, through business sense, using a lot of microbials for their blueberries and things. And it's because the chemicals are too expensive. So they've actually commercially moved towards improving their ESG through biologicals and that sort of thing, which for me was really interesting. And I was like, in an Australian context, we poo-poo biologicals because, to be frank, there's been so many snake oil salesmen that have, you put your lime under the full moon and sprinkle it with sparkle dust and it'll kill your, bugs or whatever. So it's got a bit of a reputation, but it was amazing to see the quality of the crops and the fact that they've got no synthetic chem or fert on them. So that was amazing. And there's very different production systems, costs of labour, all of those sorts of things that play into that, of course. And the other country that was fascinating, I loved coming to your country. I love England. I used to live in England.
Can I just chip in there? And while you, Maz and I, met in Brazil, saw Maz on her GFP here, and we went to a place where they sort of start the cloning process up in Cheshire. So we saw some cloned horses, we stroked a cloned dogs, and it was quite interesting, wasn't it? And we met a lady there, St. Jill. I can't remember her second name, and she was 91 or something. Wasn't she amazing? She
was my spirit animal.
Jill's, and so we since she was at this, she just joined for this part of the GFP where I caught up with Maz, and we were at this cloning place, and to be fair, I was a bit skeptic and kind of so you think about it, And we asked her what she thought about it, and she thought it was amazing. She said, "This is the future. This is definitely what we need to do." And so I get so cross with people and putting young people down, because you guys are going to sort out the future. And so obviously, said myself excluded, and the young people there. But yes, and she was an amazing person, and real. And live wire at 92. She wanted to come out on the pub crawl with us.
And Isaac, you've just summed up the gift of Nuffield, right? Is that you've got people that care about something, that are smart and egoless. So they're willing to be wrong. They're willing to be challenged. And, like that Gene place that we went to blew my mind because I didn't think that any of that was possible. And so to be able to actually go and see it and touch the animals and speak to the scientists, it's just, it's extraordinary. And Georgia was the other country that really fascinated me because they've not just recently broken from the Soviets. And obviously it's quite contentious there again at the moment, sadly, with old mate from Russia, Putin, our friend. But what I love talking to farmers in Georgia about was that when Russia left, they only left sort of 12 to 15 years ago, and they took all of their energy early 2000s, they took all their energy infrastructure with them. And what that did for the communities of Georgia was created real connections and subsistence and sharing within communities and real happiness. And they spoke to us about how quickly that's disappeared now that they've got power infrastructure back, etc. So for me, we had the COVID opportunity in Australia. We were locked down more than anywhere else on earth, I think, in some parts of Australia, bless. And we all sort of learnt, there's more important things than work and money. There's human connections, there's enjoyment, there's family, there's experiences. And then we really quickly forgot it. And being in Georgia, those reflections came back. And I was like, we need to insert more fun and family time and friends and depopulise the hard work and being buggered all the time and, that sort of thing. Because at the end of it, nobody's going to remember your job title or how much money you had. They're going to remember the impact you had on people. And I think, the gift that Georgia gave me was to refocus on that.
Well done. Can I ask a question? I'm just cautious of time. We could go for hours on this, Isaac, couldn't we? Advocacy is a major part of your work, Maz. Wherever you go in the world, two people have been there before you: the guy selling Coca-Cola and the guy selling Michael Jackson T-shirts. In the UK is a standard stat that comes out from the NFU, and it has done for 10 years, and feel free to put it on the comments whether I'm right or wrong, but 6 out of 10 kids in the UK don't know where fruit and veg comes from. How can we as farmers collectively better tell our stories and influence the public perception of agriculture? If we were going to give you that magic wand so that globally everyone knew the importance of agriculture, and we could take some of the marketing budget away from Coca-Cola and Michael Jackson T-shirts, what would be your advice to us all, please?
That is a wicked problem, Max. And, I did a lot of work in social license through that women's leadership program that I ran. And, it's really important that farmers tell their story and that we're getting out there, because what I learned with the live export suspension is if we're not telling our story, that space is filled by people that detract from agriculture. And that is not an amazing space to be in. Having said that, with the way that algorithms now work on social media, people are getting more of what they like and what they are clicking on. So it's an important piece, but it's not the only piece. So what I'd really love to see is us working from a more strategic perspective, which is getting into schools, getting in early, showcase. Like I sat next to a guy on the plane the other day, and I never talk to humans on the plane because I'm like, that is my solitude. Like, everyone be disappearing. Anyway, and I just turned to this kid and I was like, what do you enjoy doing on weekends? And he said, flying drones. And I was like, did you know that we need drone pilots in agriculture? And he's like, what? Can I get paid for flying drones? And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So that was just an example for me of how little people know about ag. Everybody goes to school. So how do we, pardon me, how do we embed in the curriculum real world agricultural examples so that it's not relying on farmers just telling their story, but it's embedded in everybody's psyche? Because while we sit here in rich countries with a full gut and a wet throat and we don't need food, and I say that very deliberately, like we don't in our country know what it's like to need food. We want food. We've got all the food choices in the world. So when you don't need food, agriculture is not important. And what I mean by that is we've got sort of an arrogance sometimes that, you know, every family needs a farmer, is a saying over here in Australia.
Yeah.
But because we don't need food, it's no difference to say, like, and we say people need to understand ag, but do you understand the basis of roads? We use them every day, but we don't ever think about it. So we've got to start to try and serendipitously embed agriculture in education, in television shows, that sort of thing, so that it starts to raise the psyche without relying on a social media algorithm. And deliberately, we're very good at talking to ourselves, and we've all drunk the Kool-Aid. We all know how rad ag is. So how do we target the women? Like, I don't know what your publications are in the UK, but like the Women's Day magazines, and like try and get in with foodies and that sort of thing, that not just talk about food, but where it comes from. So it's a battle. I think the more voices that we have at the table thinking about this, the better we're going to be. And if we can think more strategically about how do we get it serendipitously kind of happening in schools through maths problems and that sort of thing, then it's going to stand us in good stead. Because to be honest, if people knew about ag, we'd have so many people coming in. It's just an unconscious incompetence. People don't know about it.
Yeah, Maz, we need to put you through the photocopy a few times and have lots of Mazes all around the world.
No, you don't. Trust me.
Yes, we do. Trust me.
and imagine that in a bar full of Mazes. I'm going to bring it back to leadership, because that is my pet topic, and yes, and something that's I'm very passionate about, and I think ties in really with what you've just said about, and we need to keep on beating that drum and constantly, and just bring it to the forefront. And I think for that we need strong leaders in agriculture, and I don't mean just the people at the top. We need it throughout the systems, and that whole old adage of you don't need a title to be a leader. So how and that is the sort of leadership that I talk about. So how do we develop that in our sector? How do we get some more people and standing up? So a bit like you did with your women leadership thing. How do we get more people standing up and raising our voices across the industry, getting more people on board?
Isaac, it's such a good question. Again, God, you guys are full of good questions. This is wonderful chat. I think there's experiences like Nuffield, where you actually and other leadership programs that develop leadership skills. But I think there's also an opportunity and a role that all of us can play in listening. And so if somebody comes, like, there's leadership opportunities every day at work. And I am a fundamental believer in the fact that titles don't matter. Which is why I get quite uncomfortable when people read out my titles. And I'm like, it doesn't really matter. It's the impact you have on people that matters. Right. And so I think we've all got little leadership moments at work and in our families. Listen to people and support their idea. It's going to give them confidence to give you more ideas. And the more ideas, the more thinking, the more comfortable people are to bring their ideas to the fore, and then get out of the way and let them run with it. Empower them to have a crack at that. Support them. That's how we're going to get more leadership, is when people feel valued, people feel heard, they've got more confidence to step forward and actually contribute. And that fundamentally is leadership to me. So, like, how do you sort of, within yourselves, if there's people listening sort of going, but what can I do? Find something you're passionate about and gives you energy. So when you think about it, you get excited. You don't think about it and go, ugh, I can't be bothered, like me with admin. And then find out where the gap is and run with it. Speak to people, ask questions, be curious, and you'll be amazed where that can take you. Find a good mentor as well.
Isaac, we're running out of time. We could go.
I know.
Isaac, wind up for us.
How brilliant. I can't remember which episode this is, but what a belter. So Maz, thank you very much. Great to see you again. It's another one to add to our list. And, if you're listening in, do go and have a look at our back catalogue of Talking Leaders. It's on our website. Have a look at all the other stuff that we do in AgriLeader, but also look at the wider things that we do in AHDB, and get in contact. And if there's something you feel we should do get in touch. And yeah, thank you very much. It's been an absolute blast. Have a great day.
And can I just say, I just think that people like Maz are so important, not only in Australia, in the UK. So I would be saying to anyone dialed in from the likes of the Oxford Farming Conference in the UK, which is held in January, who are always looking for keynote speakers, definitely talk to Maz. IFPA.
Remember, your agent, Maz, and work through your agent.
Your 10% coming your way. The IFPA, the International Fresh Produce Association in the States, they have their Global Produce and Floral Show in October. They need to engage with them, with the likes of yourself, Maz, because we need to get this message out. And I'm just looking at your notes again about that you're a trailblazer, and I'm just going to sum up with this new terminology we've got for ESG: enabling smart growth. Let's just simplify this. Let's learn from Maz. Maz, you've been brilliant. We look to read the rest of your book. To me, it feels like you're only 42% of the way through, and you're a force for good. And we want to see all the good that you're going to do in the world, and we're here to help you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure.
Thank you, Maz.
Well done, team. Well done.